What's in store for Israel over the next 5 to 10 years in terms of new wars and aggressions? I mean, let's leave Iran and its proxies aside. Let's assume they're dealt with in some shape or form. What happens next? You think peace and quiet will reign over the Arab world, just as Netanyahu predicted many decades ago in his deposition to the United States Congress, once the regimes in Iraq, Syria, and Iran were toppled?
If you take out Saddam's regime, I guarantee you that it will have enormous positive reverberations on the region.
Imagine that. No more wars and violence. Everyone could just get along, and the region would finally see an era of stability and upward potential. Now, if you're naive, you'd buy into the superficial narrative that Israel is waiting for its last enemies to fall so that it can carry along independently as a nation on its prosperity path. But fret not. Israel is already giving you hints of what's to come. We got rid of the Palestinians, we got some treaties along the way with key Arab nations, disposed of the Arab and Muslim leaders and nations who vocalized animosity towards Israel, got further treaties, and now the Zionists are revealing their fifth and final act. Having handled the Shia powers in the region, they now turn their eyes to the Sunni powerhouses of Turkey, Egypt, and Jordan. Zionists love to tell their version of a story, but in order for it to be as effective and powerful, they must slowly seed a plot, gradually introducing it into popular culture, allowing it time to embed itself as a common idea, and then for it to become a memory, and finally build upon it as a universally accepted premise that was real all along. Whispers initially. Then one or two figures voice it publicly. But they're called out as extremists and not representative of national Israeli politics or strategies. Testing the waters, basically. In parallel, a think tank somewhere generates a white paper on the rise of Sunni radicalism or some other threat like that in places like Egypt, Jordan, and Turkey, and how this will most surely mean imminent existential threat to Israel. And then the final step, a preemptive attack on one of these nations. Over the past century, we've seen this time and time again. The tripartite aggression in 1954, when Israel allied with France and England, attacking Egypt. In the Six-Day War of 1967, when Israel attacked Egypt claiming self-defense. When Israel invaded Lebanon in 1982, and in the many times it has attacked Iran, stating it was on the verge of acquiring a nuclear weapon. In hindsight, we can witness the Zionist progression of words and then the subsequent violent actions. The semantics and precedents are there, clear as day. Now, if we sensitize ourselves to recognize the same sequencing, we can easily identify today where the latest Israeli crosshairs are focusing toward.
Because we have to be prepared for the next war, which will be probably against Turkey and Egypt.
For a growing number of Zionists, Turkey has increasingly emerged as a potential long-term strategic rival in West Asia. Recent statements by figures such as former Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, who described Turkey as the new Iran.
A new Turkish threat is emerging. I want to be very clear. Turkey and Qatar have gained influence in Syria, are seeking influence elsewhere and everywhere throughout the region. And from here, I warn, Turkey is the new Iran.
Reflecting how once there is an imminent fall of a legacy enemy of Israel's, another one quickly needs to be created and positioned. Don't forget, there must always be an offender to maintain the illusion of the victim. Turkey is a prime candidate as its model of combining electoral politics, religious conservatism, and regional activism is a direct challenge to Israel's ambitions of regional hegemony. Turkey also possesses a large economy, a substantial military, membership in NATO, and extensive diplomatic reach, making it a different kind of enemy ever confronting Israel before.
Mr. Erdogan has attacked Israel. You ask, what is my response? I'm not used to receiving lectures about morality from a leader who bombs Kurdish villagers in his native Turkey, who jails journalists, and who helps terrorists, including in Gaza, kill innocent people. That is not the man who is going to lecture us.
Under President Erdogan, Turkey has sought a more assertive regional role, expanding its influence in the Eastern Mediterranean, and namely Syria. Following years of civil war, Turkey has established significant influence in northern Syria and maintains a military presence near areas that Israel considers strategically important. Israeli leadership worry that Turkish influence could eventually constrain Israeli freedom of illicit action in the region. In essence, Turkish strategic and military influence is on Israel's doorstep, and this makes Israelis uncomfortable. Another factor is Turkey's strong support for the Palestinian cause and its frequent criticism of Israeli policies.
Israel, you are an occupier. You are an organized gang. Israel is committing war crimes.
Erdogan has repeatedly positioned himself as a vocal defender of Palestinian rights, a stance that resonates across much of the Muslim world. However, today, Zionists will want you to believe that with all these concerns, Israel strictly views Turkey as a strategic rival, and doesn't necessarily mean that Israel seeks direct confrontation. Much of its rhetoric reflects concerns about shifting regional power dynamics rather than an imminent conflict.
We will have the Turks right on our border.
We eventually will,
and I'm not so sure that we will have as easy a time with the Turks as we've had with the Iranians. I've been following Turkish military doctrine, and
the strongest army in the Middle East.
The storm is coming.
Yes, of course. And they're a member of NATO.
And even worse, they're a member of NATO.
I understand Turkey is in NATO, and the notion of if one NATO nation is attacked, then all other NATO nations will come to its defense is all fine and well. But this has never been put to the test, especially when it's Israel doing the attacking. NATO nations seem to have a duplicitous manner about them when it comes to Israel. Now, maybe Israel attacking Turkey militarily might at this moment in time be a far-fetched proposition, but don't temper your expectations too much. Please check out our new course on how to navigate Arab identity in today's world, how to define and pinpoint yourself within the various tensions found in the duality of tradition and modernity, the foundations that make us unique, even our contradictions. Unapologetically Arab is a 13-chapter course intent on helping anyone interested in appreciating what it means to be an Arab. Join now by clicking on the link in the video description at either Thinkific or Patreon, and begin your empowering journey of Arab discovery. Now, the more realistic potential aggressive engagement between Israel and Arab Sunni countries surprisingly comes with its first peace partners, Egypt and Jordan. Egypt succumbed with the Camp David Accords in 1978, whereas Jordan gave in with the Wadi Araba Treaty in 1994. For Egypt, the treaty never delivered a complete neighborly relationship with Israel. The 1973 October War led to many limitations imposed on Egyptian sovereignty, especially when it came to any activity in the Sinai Peninsula. Relations were always overshadowed by skepticism.
Only days after telling Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak to quote-unquote go to hell, Israel Beitenu chairman Avigdor Lieberman spoke out against Egypt again on Saturday, suggesting that Cairo is waiting for an opportunity to start a war with Israel.
Since the Accords, Egypt has struggled across many of its key development indicators, except for one, its military growth. Egypt today has one of the most powerful armies in the Arab world. Such a position of military strength of any Arab nation is completely unacceptable for Israel, even if it's a nation with whom it shares a peace treaty.
The Israeli Prime Minister has come out strongly against Egypt. He says that we have a relationship with them, but this needs to be monitored, and that we must prevent the Egyptian military from becoming too strong.
Add to that the instability of the political system in Egypt and the comings and goings of authoritarian military leadership, offering a system that can quickly flip on its head, initially bringing someone who plays ball with Israel to the table, while immediately thereafter introducing someone who defies previous understandings and assumptions.
The alternative could be catastrophic. Egypt could fall into the hands of the Muslim Brotherhood, or worse. That will create a domino effect. The entire Middle East will spiral into uncertainty. It happened before, it can happen again.
The other element is the strong political presence of Muslim radical movements, and mainly the Muslim Brotherhood, who are in direct opposition to Egypt's peace with Israel. The Brotherhood, although suppressed in today's political environment, can quickly emerge out of the shadows and become an influential player in Egypt's near future. On the eastern border to Israel, Jordan is another peace partner that has more often than not been a submissive ally to its partner. Jordan, over the last several years, has been repeatedly subjected to inflammatory actions by leading Israeli figures regarding its own legitimacy and sovereignty. Bezalel Smotrich, Israel's finance minister, gave a speech with a map showing the entirety of Jordan as part of Eretz Israel, Greater Israel.
He gave the address on the podium was a map of Greater Israel that includes parts of modern-day Jordan, and that's what got Amman to blast the statement.
Furthermore, Israeli leadership, including Ben Gvir, in association with key American political figures, have initiated a campaign to strip Jordan of its historical custodianship over the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound and transfer it to an Israeli-aligned entity. These aren't the actions of an ally. If this indeed does happen, Jordan will be deprived of any shred of national integrity it currently retains, from both an internal as well as from an Arab world perspective. The third point of pressure that Israel is building up on Jordan concerns the West Bank. From 2023 to mid-2026, over 100 new settlements have been approved by the Israeli government. It's an inevitability within the next decade, based on current Zionist political lingo as well as settler colonial expansion and violence, that the entirety of the West Bank will be overrun by Israeli settlers. This will definitely result in a mass displacement of Palestinians across the border into Jordan. That's almost 3 million Palestinians imposed upon the Jordanian ecosystem. King Abdullah has repeated his country's position on this impending situation, stating, and I quote, "This is a red line and an existential threat," warning that it could constitute a declaration of war.
That includes those who continue to propagate the idea of Jordan as an alternative homeland. So let me be very, very clear. That will never happen. We will never accept the forced displacement of Palestinians, which is a war crime.
If we listen to Israeli government statements in response to the words or efforts of its leadership, or in the actions of its settler populations, the official answer is always the same. This isn't representative of Israel's political or strategic position or people, and is only reflective of a very small exception of Israeli individuals, who happen to be high-ranking government ministers, members of the Knesset, or leading political players, as well as a vastly growing majority of ultra-violent and unjust settlers. The key observation here is that these statements and actions aren't done in isolation or without purpose. They're meant to trigger reactions, some external but mostly internal, to push and keep pushing these neighbors to the very brink, to cause larger rifts between Arab countries, to have Egyptian and Jordanian populations experience further disheartening at the submissiveness of their nations. The ambitions of a greater Israel can be viewed upon through two interpretations. One is as a physical embodiment of an ambition that spans from the Sinai Peninsula all the way to the Gulf, an old-school settler colonial outbreak that will envelop much of the Arab world in West Asia into a large regional Zionist state. This is the more common interpretation. The second manifestation is more of a hegemonic approach, where all surrounding nations are destabilized to certain levels through military, political, economic, and even geographical means, whereas Israel rises in dominance as every nation around it grows weaker. Israel as a target or enemy becomes secondary. Internal disputes and power plays become the focus of political players, military and security forces in these Arab nations. With this second version of Greater Israel, it becomes much easier for Zionists to attain by creating environments of instability and thus distraction. But there's no real reason for confrontation with the greater regional powers like Turkey and Egypt. No war is needed, no traditional colonial exertion beyond what is necessary. It's purely control through the injection of volatility onto every Arab nation, posing a perceived threat to the Zionist state. Israel can't live without an enemy. You can't sustain being a victim without one. In light of today's public relations disaster Israel is experiencing, they're not just going to come out and make blatant statements of regime change as they once did regarding Iraq, Libya, and Iran. But there will be signs, many secretive, some subtle, and a minority of others more obvious, provided by Zionist figures who could care less. But all these signs will give us just enough data to recognize a pattern. In parallel, Israel will refute any accusations of interference or escalation by stating that it doesn't want a war with Turkey, as it merely is competing with it in terms of influence around Israel's borders, or that the instability of nations that it might cause, like in Egypt or Jordan, are not only against its policies, but a detriment to its own security, a harming tactic. To debunk that false narrative, we only have to look at its other neighbors, Lebanon and Syria. Israel doesn't mind being an island within a sea of chaos. It doesn't mind being the last colonial outpost of Europe in an Arab world that has long shed its Western colonizers. It neither minds wars nor missiles flying into its territories, or the suffering of its citizens. As long as Arab nations are weak and in disarray, then they're okay with it. What Israel doesn't want are strong and independent Arab or Muslim nations who will stand up to its twisted ambitions.